you need to be able to excel at what you just talked about. You really need to get rid of the ego.
Yep.
As you're younger, you always want to be right. I think as you get older, you start to talk less and listen more. And that's a great strategy to become really wealthy and to ask a lot of questions. And most people don't want to appear to be dumb. I'm just not that smart. I just ask a lot of questions and I start connecting dots, and I'm willing to work really hard. So if you're willing to work hard and you're willing to ask questions and you're willing to humble yourself, that's the foundation right there to create wealth long term, if you ask me.
And welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, and the Mentoring podcast. Today, we have Gino Barbaro here with us, and he is of Jake and Gino. And man, you've got some serious stats backing you up, and also a lot of street cred. When I was out talking to people, other syndicators, other investors in the multifamily space, and I mentioned Gino, and they're like, hold on a second. Are you talking about Jake and Gino? I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh man, that guy's got those crazy courses. And then when we started looking at the stats of what your people have bought after they've done the courses and what they've learned, like, man, awesome job. Kudos to you for building such an enterprise about training and learning multifamily and how to invest in real estate.
Steve, thanks for having me on. And I got to say, Jake would love the title, the alliteration, money, mindset, mentoring. Those are three powerful words. You picked a really great title for the show. I'm not going to lie to you. I was drawn to it because I think money is such an emotional topic for people. And, let's start off by talking about money. What's the relationship with money? And I've had a pretty roller coaster ride over the last 50 something years with that relationship with money. So we can talk about the mechanics and cap rates and all, but if we don't understand the mindset and your money, and you don't understand that, you may be able to make money, but can you keep money and can you grow money? Those are all different skill sets. So I don't know where you want to take this conversation, but when I saw the title and it's looking right at me like, I am in heaven right now, brother.
Oh, dude, you know what? And that's why our first conversation, we were just like fired up. There's so many things that I was excited about, but the idea of talking about money first, I think that's extremely important because I think people's relationship with money really needs to come to the forefront. Because if you don't have a good relationship with money, it's not going to have a good relationship with you. And whether that's on the revenue side and how you earn the money, or on the wealth side and how you store the money that you've earned, either of those things, you've got to have a really good relationship with it. So what's your thoughts on the relationship with money?
I was privileged to podcast a gentleman named Ken Honda. He wrote the book Happy Money. So I see this nice yellow book. I'm reading the book Happy Money. What is that? And this was only a few months ago, and he challenged me to write a book myself. So I'm writing a book called Happy Money, Happy Family, and Happy Legacy. And I'm not saying that making money will make you happy, but there are types of money that are happy, like being on this podcast, trying to monetize something that you love. That's really happy money. There's happy energy to that. You want more of that. When I was working at my restaurant for all those years and I didn't want to be there, that's unhappy money. Being stuck in that negative, unhappy money, you can see how people's mindsets and people's feelings about money can really be negative. So what I want you to do as you're listening to this, take a deep dive into your emotions. Go back when you were a little child. What were the conversations that you heard about money? For me, one story that stands out, when I was 5 years old, I was at my grandma's house. Nice little old Italian lady, Grandma Anna. And we walked to the grocery store. It was the A&P back in New York. And I remember going to the store and I said, Grandma, can I buy these toy soldiers? And she said in Italian, Tesoro, I don't have the money. I can't afford it right now. When we go home, I promise your mom comes to pick you up, we'll buy them. And I remember, and this was a time when there were no credit cards. I remember leaving that store and saying to myself, if I don't buy something, I will never have it. And we don't have enough money. And I just figured this out a few years ago of where that scarcity mindset came. So this is a simple 5-year-old seeing that his grandma didn't have money and we didn't have the money to afford it. So I was always taught to save for a rainy day. Why is it a rainy day? Why can't you save for a happy day? It's just that's how we were taught. I mean, once you start changing the words around and the emotions, things start to change. Why was I saving for an event? All of a sudden I said, let me save for an asset. that will let me pay for the event. So when that event is over, I'll continue to have the asset. These are certain things that I started to work with my emotions with money. And really the book that changed everything for me, I think, was Garrett Gunderson's book, Killing Sacred Cows. He wrote a book about scarcity and abundance and soul purpose. And it started making sense to me. It started making sense because I was always driven by an immigrant household to think of money as you need to create money, you need to grow the money, and you need to put it away and don't take too many risks. And once I started creating my own blueprint for money and I started creating that relationship that I wanted to have with money, was it hard work? Absolutely. I needed to become a life coach. I needed to do all that personal development to understand how it was holding me back, how it was limiting me to be able to grow. Because go from one restaurant for over 20 years of my life, then to meet Jake and to be able to buy almost 1,000 apartment units without syndication in a matter of 5 years, something happened. I mean, like, what happened? I mean, I did get more skills, but I think all of a sudden the relationship that I had, the understanding of that money is only a tool. It's only a result. I'm not chasing money. I'm chasing opportunity. And opportunity comes. The more opportunity I have, the more money shows up. These things are like little building blocks that you need to work on in life. And I think if you can build a pretty good foundation and start to understand that, your foundation's strong, then you'll be able to, as money comes into your life, you'll be able to hold on to it and to continue to perpetuate it.
Absolutely. I think, to start off what you first talked about is to make money matter. You need to make money matter. You need to find a purpose, because money is just a currency of impact. Mm-hmm. And the more of it you have, the more impact that you can make. That, I think, is rule number one. And I think rule number two is when you look at scarcity to me is not necessarily saying that I'm just going to focus on two small things, is that I'm not going to focus on big things. Mm-hmm. And if you have the ability to be able to make a massive impact in the world, your scarcity mindset is actually devoiding the world of the massive impact that you could make. And once you realize that there's a certain associative greed that you have internally, that you're going to say, I'm just going to sit on the couch instead of going out and making an impact. I'm going to sit on the couch instead of raising my kids. I'm going to do this instead of actually diving deep. And because currency comes in a lot of different forms. Yes. And currency can be, the American dollar, or it could be relationships. I mean, currencies in many different ways. And so the idea of money is just one form of impact currency, but there's so many other ones. And I love when you talked about the idea of the revenue generation and then the storage of it. And then you dropped a bomb where you slipped it in the middle. And I'm going to put that at that, where you said you have how many units currently right now?
We're at 1,700 units currently right now.
And 1,700, when you first hear that, like, that's a fair number of doors. But most people, when they hear that, okay, yeah, you're just like every other syndicator. You got 1,700 doors and you're a GP and you've got, a certain amount of, whatever in that. But then you drop that other one. You said 700 doors under how much have you syndicated of those?
Well, we have 0 syndications left. So that is just me, my partner, and my business partner, Jake. There's 3 of us, and some ownership from some employees. So the vast majority of that equity is ours through the years of planning, through going through syndications, exiting, and over a span of 10 years, it doesn't take a long time. You buy 1 or 2 good deals a year. Before you look back, you're like, I've got 400 or 500 units. It's really amazing. Creating wealth can be boring and should be boring, but it's always for the long term. You always have to have the commitment to the long term. And don't go and say to me, oh, this year is going to be slow. I'm going to jump into crypto. Well, next year is slow. I'm going to jump into single family. We've been doing multifamily, me and Jake, since 2009. We've been masters. We've been trying to get better at it every year and every year. We had the ability to go into RV parks a couple of years ago, but one of our mottos is we want to become the Chick-fil-A of apartments and customer service. So if we deviate and go into RV parks, it's a different business model.
We got Frank Rizzo for that one. And
yes. Yes. Let Frank Rizzo be the Chick-fil-A of RV
park. Man, that guy's an amazing fellow. And what the great thing is you guys all know each other, and you get to the industry is just so small. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so super exciting. And then when everything, percolates up to the top, it's such a very small, tight community. And that really is super exciting for me, because let's face it, when you look under your organization and your training organization, we'll talk about that in a minute, you have 8,120 units closed by your students.
80,000.
Or 80,000. Sorry, 80,000. My apology. $5 billion in volume of deals. Mm-hmm. Like, these are not small numbers. 450 million in capital raised. Mm-hmm. Those are big stats to be able to brag about.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is the people who get into your course, they're going into your course saying, I'm here to learn. I'm not here to be then used as a capital for the deal of the teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're coming in to learn and then go out and build their legacy. And I think that's
Yes.
amazing.
Well, we came up with a framework. It was pretty simple. I'd made a ton of mistakes before I met Jake. I have my life before Jake and life after Jake. And I had no map. I had no process. I was like every other newbie. What's a deal? I need a deal. And hey, what's the IRR? And what's the rate of return? I didn't understand the relationship with money. I didn't understand long-termism. And when I made a couple of those big mistakes early on, and then when I met Jake, I said, I've got to figure this out. I've got to join mentorships myself. So early on in my career, I would have said at the time I spent thousands of dollars on mentorship. I look back and go, it was an absolute investment. But if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been prepared to meet Jake and then partner with him. And then when he goes to Knoxville in 2011, he doesn't know the business, but he's willing to work hard. He's young. Our values align. And I have the value to offer him my expertise or experience in the business. And he has his value proposition. We make really good partners. 18 months to find a deal. And then all of a sudden, buy right, manage right, and finance right. Our 3-step framework is formed. And we're actually using that to this day to invest in our own deals. So it's just a natural transition. And we both love to teach. And Steve, you know probably better than anybody, when you get on a podcast and you're teaching others, man, the crap that you learn, it's like, this is great. I'm getting paid to do this. And I'm able to learn from my students, and I'm able to learn from other people in the industry, and I'm able to share this with other people and use it in my portfolio. That's one of the cool things about creating a community and being able to leverage their experience, because you have so many different facets in multifamily. You have LIHTC housing, you have affordable, you have HUD, you have Section 8, you have student housing. You can't possibly know it all. But hey, if you have a question, somebody's got the answer in the community.
Absolutely. As a teacher in any capacity, if you have the willingness to learn, it's probably the best moment that you can learn the most, not only in the content that you know, and you can really cement the things that you know by teaching it, but you can cement the things that you don't know, and then find the people who are going to give you that information that you don't know, because you've now found those and exposed those whole. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is one of my favorite things, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's business or something that's physical. It's the ability to be able to say that, there's now a gap. Like for me, it's leg locks. I'm just not a leg locker, but I know if I start teaching an entry into a leg lock, I'm going to start to figure that out, that, okay, here's where I can ask somebody who's just happened to be a master leg locker who's in the class, and they can throw it in and say, oh, you need to do this, this, and this. And boom, now you've got some extra information.
And it's
so
interesting.
I think that's huge.
You need to be able to excel at what you just talked about. You really need to get rid of the ego. As you're younger, you always want to be right. I think as you get older, you start to talk less and listen more. And that's a great strategy to become really wealthy and to ask a lot of questions. And most people don't want to appear to be dumb. I'm just not that smart. I just ask a lot of questions and I start connecting dots, and I'm willing to work really hard. So if you're willing to work hard and you're willing to ask questions and you're willing to humble yourself, that's the foundation right there to create wealth long-term, if you ask me.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, where you're saying that rather than when we get older, we stop trying to be right. We more focus on what's the right solution. And it doesn't matter whether it comes from us or for the conversation of somebody else. Our pursuit of perfection, our pursuit of success then allows us. And again, there's a lot of people who are of the younger generation that have that mindset.
Yes.
And I think they're coming in with, especially a lot of the Gen Z, like the newest generation that's coming out, because they have such an access to information, and they can go to all these different sources and see the conflicting stories that they can hear. I think they come in with a lot of really good open minds that our generation maybe had to fight against in order to get rid of it, because we believed that the silo of information in which we needed to protect, rather than breaking down the silos and share information and grow together.
I love that. You said one thing that's important for anybody who's a leader or an entrepreneur here. The next time an employee brings you a problem, ask them to bring you the problem, but maybe offer up 2 or 3 solutions as well. And it'll make them think, and it will hold them accountable. And man, if they bring a great solution, How great is it for you? You don't have to come up with it. And by the way, you're empowering them and they'll be part of the solution, not just part of the problem. It's interesting. Like you said, you're looking at problems versus opportunities. When I was younger, I would see a problem and all it was the problem. We have a problem right now in multifamily. There's not a lot of deals out there. Well, where's the opportunity? The opportunity is they're coming, and you better start making relationships with brokers right now. You better start talking to investors right now. You better start creating content and working on your brand right now to become more visible. So there are problems, but from those problems, if you look hard enough and you think hard enough, you can find opportunities in those problems.
I think that's where everything comes out of. Once you realize that problems are the inception point for greatness, you realize that you're going to spend more time looking for problems than running away from problems. The problem that we couldn't fly is the reason why we have planes. The problem that we couldn't have lights in the dark is why we have electricity. And so all of these problems are what lead to greatness.
I'm just writing that down. I'm sorry. Problems are the inception point for greatness. That is the quote of the podcast right there. I can't get any better than that. It's all downhill from here, I think.
there you go. Well, let's talk about going downhill, because I think it's a good thing to talk about. And one of the things I want to talk about that we really bonded on when we first were talking about multifamily was the idea of property management. And so a lot of people, when you talk about multifamily, they kind of hiss and draw the cross fingers as soon as you start talking about property management. When they want to outsource that as quickly as the words are being said, where you have a little bit of a different persona around that and a little bit of a different perspective. So walk me through a little bit of your belief around that.
So let's picture a wheelbarrow. First, we'll talk about the framework, and then we'll break down the components, and we'll talk about the manage right. You have a wheelbarrow. Jake's sitting out on his lawn one day. Lawn of the month, every month. That was his gig with the chainsaw, and he's got a wheelbarrow and it's tilted over. And he says, wow, the two back legs, one's the buy right and one's the finance right. Those are both fixed. When you do that in real estate, hopefully they're off the table. The last couple of years with this short-term debt, you see what's going on with the finance right? It's been tilting over. The third part is the wheel of the wheelbarrow. That is in constant motion. It's as if you're buying a business, and you can buy a multifamily, you can buy a business, you can buy a single family portfolio through the framework. You need to buy it properly. You need to finance it properly, whether it's creatively financed, whether it's syndicated, whether you're using an SBA loan in a business, whatever it is. But the manage right is the portion where you're managing the business. You're not going to buy a 7-Eleven and then say, here are the keys to the castle. You're not going to do that. You're going to put proper management in. And if you're hissing and, booing about getting third party, I have no problems with third party, but you at least need to understand how to manage the asset yourself. You need to be able to set expectations. You need to be able to understand what KPIs are. You need to be the asset manager where you're managing the asset and you're also managing the property management company. We started with property management because we didn't know any better. We did everything backwards. We had not syndicated a deal until we had like 800 units. We're like, we should start syndicating. Everyone's doing it. Our first 25 unit deal, Jake started managing it because he wanted to get the management fees to get out of his job. But then he started liking this business. He's like, this is really cool. People are paying me. I like this. I'm making money doing this. And then all of a sudden we had resident managers. Then our third deal, we bought 136 units. We had 200 units together. We started hiring full-time property managers. He's like, this is great. You can get full-time property managers and you get maintenance techs. So I don't go out and tile floors. And this was awesome. Like, what other, I don't know how many investments there are in this world where you can actually grow a scalable business. We say at Jake and Gino, we're creating multifamily entrepreneurs. Once you understand you're buying these little businesses that create cash flow and they're little cash monsters, and you're looking at them individually, and you're able to start implementing systems through management where you can actually drive the NOI, and you don't need to have thousands and thousands of units. 1 or 2 deals can set you free. And then if you want to continue to grow and scale, my only suggestion would be not to outgrow your infrastructure. That's one thing that Jake and I did really well. We never went out and put another 700 or 800 units on our portfolio. That would stress our infrastructure, stress the number of people. Since we're vertically integrated, we have to hire property managers. And hey, if anyone's been through COVID and remembers what COVID's been the last 3 years, labor was pretty tough. It was pretty tough getting windows and getting doors. So if you're trying to put all these deals on and it looks great and you're making fun and having fun on Instagram, but at the same time, it's like, holy crap, I can't get that's a problem. So look at it as a scalable business. Look at it as something where you can hire third party if you select to, but you need to be driving that ship. You need to be on weekly calls with them. And I'll say, Steve, another thing. If you want to partner up with an operator, that's an even better idea. Go out there and find someone who's operating multifamily, partner up with that person, put them on your team, and I just put another like 20 or 30% in your pocket just by that one suggestion, because I think that is phenomenal. There are a lot of really great operators out there who are doing the business and have been doing it for years, and they know there's the value. Grow smart, grow intentionally, and do not outgrow your infrastructure.
That makes so much sense. When you look at growing, one of the things, it's actually at Keller Williams that they do a really great job of talking about this, is building your bench, right? So if you're looking at growing, it's the idea of you're always pre-hiring before you hire. So that when you need to have that person come in, you've got the pick of the litter, you know exactly you can grab and put in when you need it, rather than, shoot, I now need somebody. Where are they? And that's usually where businesses run into problems.
That's the hardest thing in business, I think. We live by this quote. I think I want everyone to write this quote down because it's made a lot more sense to me over the last couple of years. Revenue is vanity, profit margin is sanity, and cash is king. To me, our PP, or our profit per unit, that's the metric that we want to focus on. How much profitability does each unit have after all expenses? So if we're focusing on that, we're not focusing on the quantity of doors. We're focusing on the quality of doors. We know that 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms crush it in our market. The 1 bedrooms, not so much. Their profit per unit's a lot less than the 2s and 3s. So are we going to go out and buy those deals? Possibly at the right price point, but not at the price points that they are right now. So understanding what you're trying to accomplish, and that's, once again, the relationship with money. Do you want to have more equity in a deal? Do you want to have more control in a deal? Or you're not minding, you just want to scale up because the more doors you have under ownership, even though it's less equity, when markets do rise, you're going to get more equity out of those things. So it really comes down upon what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And that, I think you got to work in something else, another letter into there, because the U needs to fall in there, because most people talk about units. Like, this is how many units I have. And then you find out that they're, that actually don't own any of them. They're a JV on all of them. And you're like, okay, well, do you, and so it's just the idea of none of that matters. It all rolls down to the end of is what is it generating for wealth? You said cash. I'd rather say profit or wealth. Just, because I do have a fundamental belief around cash itself, as a fiat currency, but, you're still building up an annuity, and you're building up a positive annuity. And what's the value of that? And I think focusing on it, if you don't focus on the things that matter, you're going to focus on the things that don't matter, and that's success follows attention. So you're going to do a lot of things around the things that don't matter, and the thing that matters is going to fall to pieces.
Well said.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And that was one of the things when you were talking about the idea of the property management, is that really helps you hone in on ensuring that you have, now the other thing you said is you said you have a good relationship also with the tenants, and you didn't actually call them tenants, and you had a different mode around. I know you used the U word a few times just because this is the common euphemisms, but you kind of changed the verbiage around that you don't really say units, you don't say tenants, and you have a different thing. Because I think you were talking about, what is it? Tenants, toilet, and trash. And a lot of people think about that.
Yeah.
You think of it in a different lines.
I think as you grow your portfolio and what you're trying to accomplish, we want to call our tenants residents. We want to call our units apartment homes, because they're homes. They're homes to people who live there. They're creating memories. And I think if you're going to be a successful business owner, I think you have to have empathy for your customer, whoever your customer may be. And that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made starting my restaurant all those years ago. I started a business to provide for my family. You don't start a business to provide for your family. You start a business to provide value for the customers. Now, if you're a syndicator, you have several customers. You have partners, you have investors, you have residents. You're the last sucker. So you're the last one to get paid. You better provide a lot of value for those people. And for Jake and Gino, it's the same thing. I'm going out and buying a multifamily. I'm also providing value for the bank. The bank is 70, 80% partner. So I better be providing value and paying them back, right? We forget about that little aspect of investing. But I wish I had that concept or that belief or that ability to think of it in that terms when I started out, because I would have taken it so much more seriously, because customers, I would have more empathy for them. When they'd come into the restaurant and take out a wedge and go home at nighttime and eat that wedge, I was providing dinner for them. They didn't have the time. They could sit down with their family. Boy, if you think of it in those terms and look at it from that paradigm, everything changes. You start to enjoy your life. It doesn't become, another thing. And it's the same thing with multifamily. You're an asset manager. All you're looking at is spreadsheets every day. People aren't spreadsheets. People have feelings. People need to get to work. People have a life. People are creating memories and where you're living. And if you can rip that down and take that into account, I think you'll become a much better business owner.
Absolutely. When you say that about the restaurant, it always makes me think of the idea of a thing that came out of Grant Cardone's office, is the idea of if you're selling, don't sell the labor, sell the baby. And when you're talking about that idea of the pizza, it's not, or the wedge, whatever it was, when it gets home, it's not about the food. It's about the saving of the time that now they can spend time with the family. They can focus on the thing that's important. It's not about just the sustaining them. It's about enabling them. And that made it so that it's such a more important decision.
Yes.
And you're really supporting families. And that is a whole different way of looking at, supplying food from a restaurant.
Yes. And the other thing I really don't like about the conversation nowadays is there's all these gurus out there talking about scaling. And I got caught up in that when I was at the restaurant. Like, how do I scale this? Maybe you don't have to scale. Maybe that's not maybe that's just your goal, your mission in life. Maybe you don't have to scale to 50 million and then sell and then repeat it. Some people aren't built to do that. Some people don't have to do that. I was really content at the restaurant. If I'd figured some things out, I may still have the restaurant right now. I may have a couple of locations. I may have a physical product, cookbooks and all that. But I was drawn into this fact of having to scale. And read the book Small Giants. I love that book, Small Giants by Bo Burlingham. We don't have to be the next Facebook or the next Uber or the next Airbnb. I like owning 1,700 units and buying 300 or 400 quality units a year. And maybe you're listening to this and you may fall in that same category, but you're being brainwashed and told into it. Oh, you've got to scale up to 9 figures. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, if you don't feel that's part of your mission. To me, I want to have this education with Jake and Gino where I talk to every single student. I get on blueprints with them. We have 5 internal events a year. 5. I go to all of the events. I know all the students. It's really hard to scale an education company to 8 or 9, but maybe I don't want to. If I scale it, then I lose my genuineness. I lose the impact. I lose the relationships. You talk about currencies, relationships. A lot of these people have impacted my life, but I've impacted their lives. They become friends. They become, I want mentors to me. Why do I want to lose that if I'm just thinking about scaling just as a form of scaling? Think about that. Think about, do you want to be a small giant? And there's nothing wrong if you do want to scale. Just scale for the right reasons. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. I used to build really big houses for very wealthy people. So the average size of house we built would be anywhere between 40,000 and 55,000 square feet.
Wow, that is friggin' awesome.
Yeah, so these are pretty big houses. And I remember, somebody talking about that exact thing. They were talking about how their business got so big that they lost touch with the thing that got them there in the beginning.
Yes.
And because every time that they want to go talk to like an end client or whatever, or when an end client wants to reach out to them, it goes through all of these gates, and a lot of the most important messages never actually got to them. So there was all these boundaries for them to be able to learn about their clients that they really wanted to understand, because they weren't able to keep in tune with it because they scaled so quickly.
Yes.
Now, they didn't have the lament of scaling. They just had a lament of scaling in a way that divorced them from the thing that gave them meaning in their business.
But the interesting thing is when they do scale and people say they're going to exit, they've put all this energy, all this effort, all this love, all this care into a business, and then they're exiting, and then they're sitting there with this pile of money and they don't know what to do with it. They've got to find another thing. So I just find it to be interesting. Just be aware of that. Like, okay, it's always great. You're younger people and you may need that liquidity event to get into a next opportunity. I'm not saying not to do it, but at some point there's some people that have exited deals and exited businesses just because they thought, hey, it was a great payday. I mean, do you really need 200 million bucks? I think you'd be okay with earning a few million bucks a year, but still doing what you're passionate about, still creating that impact and still creating legacy for the next generation. That's all I'm saying. Just be aware and have an open mind about it. Don't be drawn in to the gurus of today saying you need to do it this way. You need to find the way that works best for you.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many gurus out there I think there's a guru for every street in New York, and then some. And so you've got to find the one that speaks most to you in the way that they communicate. And sometimes it's a specific guru for a specific situation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to connect with something within you, you might have one. And if you're trying to connect to a revenue stream, if another, trying to connect to creating wealth, that might be another one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's trying to find. It's not saying gurus are bad. It's just saying find the one that makes the most sense for you.
I love that. I need to ask you a question. How did you get into building 40,000 square foot homes? There's not a lot of clients for that persona, is there?
No, you get into one and then you get into them all. And
Yes.
so we were specifically in the HVAC space. So we did indoor pools, we did radiance heating,
That's
snow
awesome.
melting, geothermals systems. And, it was great until it wasn't. And, the technology side was amazing. A lot of the clients were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The margins were so thin that eventually you run into one or two bad actors.
Yes.
Your business can go defunct. And we in 2014 ran into a situation where a couple bad actors, some manufacturing defects that happened throughout there was hyperinflation. And so that all happened. And then, just a lot of non-payment and just all of those things happening all at once. I had no choice but to leave the industry.
Oh.
And so it was 2014. I think it was about, we'll say $750,000, give or take, in debt. And young family, my wife was on mat leave. We just had our second son, and I had to figure out, how do I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And so that door shut down. I found jobs for everybody. We had about 20 employees, give or take, and we found jobs for everybody so that because they all had mortgages. And so, they all got landed, which made me happy. And then I just had to absorb that. And I paid all the small suppliers and negotiated with some of the bigger ones, and then just ate the big ones. And it took me probably about 6, 7, 8 years to kind of really wash that through the system. Because it does take time to kind of process that. And I was lucky. I found a mentor in real estate her name's Michelle Mason. And she, kind of pivoted me out of the construction space into the real estate space. And so for my first year of real estate, I think I sold like 40 some odd houses, 43 houses.
Wow.
In my first year of real estate. Yeah. And that was, a big thing. And then, I rolled into, that was at one brand. And then I rolled into Keller Williams, which is the second brand. And I was able to then use a lot of their training methodologies to build up my mortgage business.
That's awesome.
And then that's really grown. So, yeah.
Congratulations. That's a great story. You got punched in the face. It's a lonely business out there, right?
We just got punched in the face just last year in Canada. The one thing, whenever I talk across the border, they always get flabbergasted by this, is that we have mortgages that adjust every 5 years. We call them fixed mortgages. And then my American counterparts look at me with the face that you're giving me right now. They're like, what are you talking about? If it adjusts every 5 years, that's not fixed. They're like, but it's fixed. They're like,
Words
that's
matter.
not fixed.
Words matter,
Yeah,
my friend, right?
and then you wait, then you kind of think, you go, you're right. If it's adjusting every 5 years, that's not fixed. And so a lot of Canadians are going through this right now where, they bought real estate. Real estate's coming up. It was cash flow positive. You had your 2 or 3 or 4% interest, and then the renewals came in at 7 or 8% interest. And that drives a lot of the profitability down into the toilet. And so, we've had properties that have gone through some of those situations, and you just got to find out, how do you do that? And that's where I always talk about problems. And so the idea is always look for a bigger problem. Like if you have a $10,000 problem, find $1 million problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then that $10,000 problem doesn't really seem like a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we did this year. And we've had a good pivot and yet again, and we just keep on punching. And so that's the idea, is to keep on fighting forward.
It's actually interesting when you go back to our framework, buy right, finance right. We probably would not invest in Canada for that reason, because we want fixed rate, long-term financing. And if your business model is, hey, you can always buy real estate. That's what people don't understand. You can't always sell real estate. And that's where we are right now, because all of a sudden rates are up, cash flows down, there's uncertainty. You're just hoping that your debt is fixed and stable and you can weather the storm. And if you're able to weather the storm, great. But I don't know whose idea that was in Canada to do that. Is it because they want to spur activity, and every 5 years they don't want people holding assets for the long term? I mean, Steve, I think that
I can tell you exactly how. I can tell you exactly why. And I think I figured it out, why Canadian real estate is popped in pricing, not only because we have the crappy Canadian dollar, compared to the American dollar in value, but it's because when you look at adjustable rates, that means that when what we call fixed rates, they adjust every 5 years. What that means is they're containing their interest risk, their cost of funds to only 5 years.
Yes.
So that allows them to offer, whenever we looked across the border, we're like, man, we've got amazing interest rates compared to them. Well, no, we don't, because you have a 30-year mortgage.
Yes.
We have a 5-year mortgage. So when your 30-year locks in at like 4%, and we're like, we're so much better than you guys. We have it's locking in as a fixed rate for, 3%. But in 5 years, we're going to have interest exposure.
Yes.
What does that do? It trumps up the real estate market.
Yes.
It would behoove the government to put in 30-year mortgages to give some stability to the people who are buying real estate. Yes, the cost of funds are going to go up. Yes, that's going to affect the value of real estate because of the inverse relationship. Yes. But that's going to create a lot more market stability. And I think that's something that I think would be interesting to consider.
So what Steve is saying is, come to Jake and Gino, learn how to buy real estate, multifamily in New York, in New York, in the United States, and just there's ways to do it. I mean, as a Canadian investor, you can invest passively in the United States. And I would actually look at that. You can diversify your funds. That's the great thing about being a passive investor. You can invest with different operators, different markets, different asset classes. Hey, I love multifamily. I love build to rent. I love self-storage, whatever it is. You can diversify over so many different things if you learn how to buy right, manage right, and finance right.
Well, when you talk about the buy right, the idea of buying in the States, I think is such an interesting idea for most Canadians. I mean, I'm going to shock you with what I'm about to say, but what we see in Canada for the last number of years is cap rates were running at like 3.5, 3.25.
Wow.
And yeah, just insane low caps. And so to be able to make those deals work, I mean, they're impossible.
Yeah.
And
your cap rate's lower than interest rates. If your interest rate's 7, your cap rate's 3, that's a foreclosure.
Exactly. Especially when they adjust.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely some risk that can happen. I mean, in large multifamily, you can get longer terms and you can get longer situations. So yes, you'll see that more, but in the single, like the people who buy the duplexes, the triplexes, which we bought were duplexes. And so we did a lot of burst strategy stuff. And so that's where we kind of got a little bit of a catch. But the idea of going south, I think there's a huge number of Canadians that their eyes are looking down south because they look at how landlords are treated in Canada. They're treated like the scourge of the earth. When landlords are providing homes, right? Yeah. They're investors who are investing in homes. And I think that's something it'd be better to call them investors investing in homes than landlords because it doesn't say Lord in it.
I was thinking of this actually today, and it's important for people to understand this concept. You're going to bash the landlords and the investors, and you're not going to pay them, right? So it's a trickle-down effect because they have investors. So you as a resident are stealing from the landlord and from the investor. They may be in a hedge fund or a fund. So you're not only stealing from them, but what happens if that asset is held in a pension fund by teachers? Now you're not only stealing from them, you're stealing from that fund as well. So if you can think of that concept, and as the resident, you're not paying for taxes, you're not paying for insurance, you're not paying for contract labor, you're not paying for repairs, you're paying a fixed fee. So I think if we can do a better job of describing that, and the fact that the government cannot provide housing, that's why there are investors. That's why we have amazing benefits to be able to do that, because they cannot do that. It's proven. I mean, if you've been into some government housing in the United States, I was from New York, so I would go into Harlem and I'd see the single resident occupants there. It was actually scary. The drugs in there, the crime in there, right next to brownstone homes that were $2 million right down the street. You have an SRO, and it's just mind-boggling to see that. And I think the government can't have it both ways. You can't bash us as investors, but yet need us at the same time. It's really an irony, isn't it?
I totally agree with that. And I agree with you about the government housing. I mean, we were not raised as a wealthy family, and I did have a lot of friends in government housing. And you're right, they were not well run. And this was something that was tried back in, the 70s, 80s. They tried to really build up the government housing. And then, I think they're trying to bring that back again. I think it was the old Trudeau, and now it's the new Trudeau in Canada. And because they're trying to say, well, you guys can't handle it, so we're going to build it. And we just know how that's going to go. And it's not
good luck with that.
not going to go well.
No, it's not.
Yeah. And so I think the idea of changing the term from landlord, I think it has to change. I think if that term gets removed, look, we're going to cancel, a lot of words anyways. We might as well cancel that one too. And I think, but that's a word that should be canceled. It should be, housing relationship manager, or, something along the lines of that, or, community creator.
You know what you should do? We should solicit all the real estate brokers out there, because they're the ones who have the most amazing marketing terms: value add, material value add. They've got all transitional value add. They've got some great marketing. So we should ask the real estate brokers for some titles. I think they come up with
it's either that or IBM. IBM's got all the best acronyms, so one of the two.
Love that.
Now, with kind of getting into the idea of your course, so why did you start it? Like, I mean, you've got all these things going to go with we always talked about, the idea of focusing on things that you're good at, and, focus on like keeping your eye on the prize. Now you're a teacher, you're teaching. What is that? Why?
I had the revelation about 6 months ago. I was on a podcast with a gentleman named Rene Rodriguez. Great public speaker. I think you should have him on. If you can have him on, he's awesome.
Yeah.
And he said, go back to when you're about 9 to 12 years old. Think of a story that really impacted you. And I thought about going to work with my dad. When I was 9 years old, I would go to work with my dad. He had a restaurant. I'd walk into the restaurant with him in the morning. There'd be the French bread. We would go into the kitchen. My dad would teach me how to cook. I was a 9-year-old holding a knife. I was on the cooking line with him. They would call him Chef Vito. He was so proud of the job. He was really excellent at what he did. He mentored a lot of the people. He had a lot of respect. And I grew up with that. That's why I went into the restaurant business. And when the restaurant business was over and he passed away in 2007, and then I left in 2016, I was at crossroads. I'm like, Jake, what do we do? I'm living in Florida here. I'm trying to buy deals, but I don't really like it. Let's stay up in Knoxville. I started the Jake and Gino community, the education. And as I'm talking to Rene, he's like, don't you see it? He's like, it's just a continuation of the legacy of your dad. He was a mentor to you. He passed on so many things. All the values that you had, that he had, went into you. And now you're sort of doing this on a scale of teaching people in real estate, what he was doing to you and mentoring you. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. And I did it initially, like the rest of us, to start to monetize. How do you make money in education? And that's how we all start. But then when you take a deeper dive, the most of us will burn out, because the money's is really not worth it unless you get to the fortune builder size, but very, very rare. And as I started to continue to grow and continue to write books and continue to grow the community, I really liked it. I became a life coach, and I started helping people out, not just on the multifamily side, but on the personal development side, because that's important. And then, like I said, the relationship with money and teaching people amazing habits and how to build wealth and protect the wealth. And then before you know it, it's like, wow, I'm learning all of these concepts about whole life insurance and about estate planning that I never would have learned if I had just stuck in the lane of just doing deals. And to me, it's been a blessing that we've been able to do this, because we've learned so much from the podcast and from the education that we've been able to implement into our multifamily business. We interviewed a gentleman. I forget what's his name, the one who wrote the E-Myth, Michael Gerber. Yeah, and he was on our show about 3 years ago, and he looks at me, he goes, what are you doing? Why don't you quit the education? That's not where you're making the money. You're making more money in the syndication. And you know what? He was right. I mean, logically, that all made sense. Rationally, that made sense. But that's not where my heart was. I mean, like, I don't, at the end of the day, I was making more than enough money to make the decision that if this education, and I'm not making millions of dollars a year, I'm still really happy with it, because this is where I want to be. And it's actually creating a legacy for my family. All these shows that I'm creating, we've written 3 kids books. That's going to the kids and the grandkids, all this stuff. I just don't want to hand them over a portfolio of 1,700 units. I want to hand them over a business on how to run those 1,700 units and how to enjoy them, but also help a lot of people along the way.
It's interesting. We started off with the money side, and then we, hit the mentor side. And then you talked about the life coaching element, which is the mindset side. And so we're kind of bouncing between all 3.
That's why when I said I saw the podcast title, I'm like, dude, this is I love the title here.
Which is perfect. Yeah. When we hit the mindset side, and you talk about that, and I think that's one of those things that really, I think people don't give enough credit to the idea of mindset. And I think it's so important that needs to be fixed as the first thing, and then an ongoing focus on mindset as you're moving forward, because things change all the time.
Yes.
What do you think is, in your mind, the most important thing for people to focus on when they're looking at their mindset?
When I read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, this was several years ago, and I would recommend it to anyone who has not read it. It's not a difficult read, but it just explained a lot of things about my character. And I had a fixed mindset. She talks about two mindsets, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. Now, the fixed mindset is one that when you're born, you think your qualities are fixed. You're not going to be able to grow. You're not going to be able to learn. Perfect example of a fixed mindset is John McEnroe. You can be an amazing talent, but everything is an excuse. You can't take responsibility. It's too cold. The sawdust is no good. There's too much noise. You're always making excuses. You don't take responsibility. Whereas the growth mindset, sort of humble yourself. You're here going, I don't know it, but I'll figure it out and I'm going to grow. Like Michael Jordan. How many people do you know at the height of their career quit their sport and go play a sport that they're not really that good at, but they just want the challenge. They want to grow. And he was pretty damn good at baseball considering. So that is like the embodiment of the growth mindset. Lee Iacocca, fixed mindset. Always need to be right. Always need to put people down. Always need to show the superiority. Always have that ego. Can't take criticism. That's the fixed mindset. And I think that is so important if you want to have, I think, an amazing life. If you can adopt that growth mindset in certain areas of your life, because you can have a fixed mindset, let's say in the area of health. You can have a growth mindset in the area of growing a family or your money, whatever that is. Just look at it from that perspective. And if you can have more of a growth mindset in more areas of your life, you'll be able to grow. You'll be able to, for me, when I made a mistake on a deal, I didn't kill myself. I wasn't stopping myself from going to the next deal. I was like, okay, but the fixed mindset, I can't make mistakes. I've got to look perfect. I had a physician on our podcast yesterday. He's wrote a book. His name is Dr. Mort. He wrote a book on anger. And it was such an epiphany for me. He says, as a physician, we are trained not to be wrong. We are always right. So we can't even fathom the idea of being wrong. And I'm like, what kind of life is that? That really sucks. Cause like basically if they're wrong, patient's dead. But I mean, like that carries over into a lot of other aspects of life, whether it's relationship, whether it's money, whether it's family, whether it's health, whatever it is. And it's very interesting. Just check yourself. Do you have a fixed mindset? When somebody brings something up to you, do you hate the criticism? Do you say no? Or do you say, you know what? I can look at it from that perspective and grow. That to me changed everything. And then from there, being able to have the show, the podcast, being able to learn from others and learning from somebody who only has 40 units and they've known something that I don't know that has 1,700. That's pretty cool to say, wow, that person can teach me something. If we all had that openness, man, it's such an accelerant for your life.
I think when you look at the openness, I almost look at it like the human body. I think we as a human need to have our fixed components, which is our skeletal system, so we're not just a glob that goes wherever the glob goes. Like if the room tilts slightly, we go this way. We've got our fixed elements that kind of keep us in check so that we have a structure to who we are. And that sort of structure, I mean, as we grow and we get older, the structure changes. As we get even older, it gets brittle. And so things will change. But generally speaking, we have that skeletal structure. But then we have the muscles that allow us to move those structures as need be. And I think if our brain operates the same sort of way, that, yeah, we do have our fixed, moral compass where there's certain things that we maybe won't veer from. And we know in our mind what is right and we know in our mind what is wrong. And we're going to kind of keep those things as sort of a polarity. But then we can do deviations based on what we see around us and how we can adapt and intentionally allow things to come in and be able to absorb those. And through absorbing them, we either choose to reject them or we choose to accept them. And I think if we keep that kind of a mindset, I think that allows us to grow and be really effective.
If you look back at your life 10 years ago and you're saying to yourself, I really can't believe I thought that, or I can't believe I was that person, then you really haven't grown because, 10 years ago, I had 30 units. I was still slaving away at the restaurant. I thought you needed money to make money. The relationship with my wife wasn't as great as it is now. The relationship with my children isn't where it is now. I think that's the whole that's the whole key to life, is being able to be open. You're either growing or you're regressing. That's the
Yeah.
reality. And if you have a fixed mindset, you will regress, because you will just not be open to any ideas. And I forgot who said it also. It's pretty wonderful to be wrong sometimes, because when you're wrong, you can learn from being wrong. I think if you're so fixed like a physician to always to be right, and you're set on your position, there are other ways to look at things. I mean, that's just the reality.
Well, that's where the idea of, I don't know if it was Jim Rohn who ever said this. He said, show me the 5 people who you're surrounding yourself, and I'll show you your future. And if you can always constantly elevate the 5 people you surround yourself with,
yes,
if you're the dumbest person in the room, then you're in the right room. Because you're going to be learning so many things. But if you're the smartest person in the room, maybe you either A, don't really realize that that's not the case, or B, you need to find another room.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. That was Jim Rohn.
That was Jim Rohn. Yeah. Dude's awesome. I love listening. I could listen to Jim Rohn for days and days. One of the great things that you've done throughout the whole podcast, and I give you a lot of credit for this, is you've sourced and cited so many different material that people can go out and find it and really dive deep into a lot of the things and really learn. And I think that's great to give credit. And because I think a lot of the things that we learn and we espouse today, we're really stepping on the back of giants.
Oh yeah.
And we have to be able to really understand that that's not our original, but it's actually coming from somebody else. So I want to just ask you the last thing when we close off around the mentorship. For you, when we look at your journey, if you're going to pick 1 or 2 of your favorite mentors, who would they be?
I would say Zig Ziglar, because I remember driving in the car, in my early 30s, and I just used to listen to his voice, and it was tough, it was difficult. I wasn't making money, I wasn't doing well at the restaurant, and to hear his voice, and it just always impressed upon me that he wasn't a speaker, he was a teacher. And I'm like, if somebody from Yazoo, Mississippi can do it, then I can do it. And he just was always positive. He had some great messages, great role model, great family. I was able to, interview his son about 3 years ago. That was friggin' amazing as well. But I would say I like Zig. I just liked everything about him.
Yeah, I think Zig has been so impactful on so many lives. I think, I hear Zig quite a bit. I hear, Gerber, obviously, I hear him quite a bit as well. And I think the one thing that happened with Zig that I think, and this was one of the interviews that talked about when they did a survey on the people who attended his events versus the people who bought his courses, and the impact that came out of people who actually bought his courses than people who just listened to him was so much more. He always thought it was him pontificating on the stage, but it was actually the people who bought his courses were the ones who actually were able to see the most success that came out of Zig. And I thought that was really, really, really cool.
I think, Steve, that's a testament to people having skin in the game. I mean, like, listen to a podcast, reading a book, they're all wonderful. But if you really want to take the success to the next level, you need to skill up and you need to put some skin in the game. And I'm talking from experience. I've read, I don't know, a couple thousand books, but I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on personal development, whether it's speaker training, whether it's scaling a business, whether it's learning how to invest in multifamily. I'm taking opera lessons to sing right now. You want to become a better singer? You got to spend the money, because it holds you accountable. Because next week, my lesson is on next week. I'm going to practice. I'm not going to waste that money. So understanding that and saying, if I want to get really serious in something and take a deeper dive, I need to be held accountable. And the only way we hold ourselves accountable is if we think we're losing something. And if we put some money down, we want to see value from that money that we've just invested.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you pay attention to what you pay attention to. And I think that is extremely important. Now, as we get into the close, for people to reach out to you, obviously the easiest way to start to understand a little bit more about you is to obviously go to jakeandgino.com and see your smiling faces there. You've got your podcast as well. You want to share a little bit about the podcast too? And
well, we're having you on the show. It's the Jake and Gino show, and it's an interesting show because we try to center it around multifamily, but multifamily is a business. So we have thought leaders on. I love public speaking because of communication, because if you're going to raise capital, you have to know how to do that. We've got branding experts on. We just had Brendan Kane on, who did the 1 million followers. So we have some really interesting shows. It's really about entrepreneurship. That's what it is. Because if you're going to invest in multifamily, even if you have a couple duplexes, you're not going to stay there. You're going to buy the couple duplexes, then buy the fourplex, then buy the
Yeah.
eightplex. So you need to learn how to obviously grow a business. Just go to jakeandgino.com. All the podcasts, all the shows there. We have a how-to show that's 10 minutes long every week. How-to, you can learn. By the time you watch 30 of those how-tos, you'll be able to buy a multifamily. Trust me.
That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. Well, Gino, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're a wealth of knowledge. I could talk to you for hours, and that's why I'm so excited to be on your show.
Yeah.
Gino, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Steve. Take care,
guys.
Brother.
This is the Money. This is the Mindset. This is the Mentoring Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.